Hello, and welcome back to the Intuition Activation Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Rachel, a spiritual medium and intuitive coach, and I'm so happy that you're here and you decided to join me on this intuitive development journey. And I'm really excited for this week's episode. I decided to take a little pause between the intuitive development series where we talk about a new Claire each week because I've been getting this question from clients a lot. And the question is how to tell if I'm an old soul. Am I an old soul? How to tell? And so that's what I want to dive into this week. Not only what are the character traits of an old soul, but then how do you go about connecting with your past lives? Why might it be helpful to do that? And how do you go about doing that? And I actually want to argue that it's a lot easier to connect with your past lives than it actually is to develop your intuitive abilities or to develop your intuitive skills or the clairs. This was actually my very first experience. With connecting to my intuition was actually experiencing a past life of my own through a meditation in the very early days when I was just discovering meditation. And so I really think this is going to be really helpful for you if you're just starting out on your spiritual journey or your spiritual awakening, because starting to connect with your past lives is a great starting off point for jumping into your intuitive abilities. And so we're definitely going to dive into that and also all of the character traits that you might have that mean that you are an old soul or not. So, before we dive into this episode, I do want to remind you that this podcast is up and available on YouTube. So, you can head over to my channel at I Am Jessica Rachel, and you can see me talking to you as we do this episode. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it, ring the bell, and comment over there. I always love to connect with people over there. And then of course, if you are listening to this podcast, please don't forget to help me share this podcast. If this episode resonates with you, don't forget to give it a 5-star review and to send it to a friend. And one more sort of piece of news that I would love to cover before we dive in is just a reminder that I will be going on a short maternity leave to welcome my new baby come May. And so I am opening up slots when I return to have spiritual guidance sessions in July. And those spots are starting to book up. So if you would like to have a spiritual guidance session before the end of the year, before the end of the summer, definitely go over to my website, jessicarachel.co/sessions, and use the code intuition, all caps, to get 10% off of your first session with me. And the intuition activation mini course, which is going to tell you all about how to reactivate your intuitive abilities and start to get real and clear answers from your spirit guides, is also still up on my website, but that coupon code is expiring soon. So same code, intuition, all caps, for 10% off the course price. And that code is only available till the end of April, and then there's no more discount. So definitely go and grab your course before the discount goes away. That being said, let us dive into today's episode. So, the first thing that I want to share is that if you are listening to this podcast, you're going on some sort of spiritual awakening, you're trying to reactivate your intuitive abilities, you believe that there is something beyond just the regular mundane activities of life here on this planet, I'm going to argue that you are probably an old soul. So, if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you are an old soul. But we're still going to definitely dive into all of the characteristics that might help you define what level of old soul you are. There's a really amazing book by a very talented medium whose name is Ainsley MacLeod, and he wrote a really amazing book called The Instruction, and I'll definitely link that book in the show notes. And in this book, he really outlines all of the different soul ages. And so he offers that there are sort of 10 different levels that a soul can sort of experience. And you can have multiple lifetimes within each level. And each level sort of has certain characteristics or certain character traits or certain lessons that you need to learn or experiences that you need to have before you can sort of move on to the next level. And he outlines what each of those 10 levels sort of delineates for your soul's journey. And I can definitely say that in channeling for my own clients, I do get a soul number. Like I do sort of get if you're on a scale of 1 to 10, are you a level 1 or are you a level 10 or anywhere in between that? But I don't necessarily receive the specific character traits or lessons that are sort of outlined for that particular soul level. And so the way that I like to categorize an old soul is because I do get those numbers. Are you a soul level 1 through 5? I sort of categorize as a young soul, and 6 through 10, I would categorize as an old soul. And so I do want to remind you that that doesn't mean you have 10 lives, right? Just 10 and you're done. You could have multiple lifetimes within a level and kind of repeat that level until you kind of have the expected experiences or lessons or sort of level of enlightenment that you're meant to achieve within that level before you kind of switch over to the next level. Now, that being said, you can have, as I said, you can have multiple lifetimes within each level. So you could be, in level 2 for, 10, 20, 30 lifetimes, right? Until you start to kind of learn that lesson or have that experience that is intended for you. But you can also skip more than one level within one lifetime. And this all sort of depends on the level of enlightenment or awareness that you gain within each lifetime. So, if we talk about the ultimate goal, what is it that's going to help you up level? And I'm laughing at myself because this kind of sounds like we're talking about your lives here on the planet like a video game, right? How do you get to the next level? But it kind of is like that because we come here with amnesia, always with the goal to come back and remember who we really are. And who is it that we really are? Well, we are these beautiful soul beings who are a piece of the master, right? A small piece of source that are having a human experience. And we have to spend all of this time sort of coming back to the idea and the awareness that number one, we are a piece of the oneness, right? We are a piece of the master. We are a part of the universe, God, source, whatever you want to call it, and that we are all one. And so the closer you come to that realization that you recognize and kind of achieve mastery over this understanding that you are a piece of that, that you are part of the universe, you are part of source, you are source itself in some ways, that's going to sort of get you closer to finishing your incarnations here on the planet. Now, I don't want to sort of get confused because I know I had an episode a couple of weeks ago about earth angels, and we talked about sort of souls who don't necessarily come back to the planet over and over again, right? Sometimes they skip around and they jump to other realms, and star seeds do the same. We'll definitely have an episode on that as well. I want to really focus today on the type of soul who does incarnate here over and over again, right? One who's not skipping around and kind of jumping from planet to planet or star system to star system and then coming down to earth for 1 or 2 lives and then going away again. I really am talking about the souls who kind of come to the planet and stay here for all of their incarnations until sort of mastery is achieved. So that's really the type of soul we are kind of trying to explain, because I would argue that that's the case for the majority of us. Starseeds and earth angels, they're a little bit more rare, I would say, than your typical earthbound soul. That being said, there are some characteristics that are going to help you identify, am I a younger soul or am I an older soul? The first thing you can do is that you can actually ask yourself, to your higher self, your intuition, am I an old soul? Go through meditation, trust your subconscious, trust that your body remembers and that you remember. And if you were to sort of take a few deep breaths and ground yourself and get centered, maybe do a little meditation and directly ask your subconscious, am I an old soul, or what level soul am I in? I would argue that you would probably get an answer. You would probably hear, like, yes, you are an old soul, or I am an old soul. And if you ask for a number from 1 to 10, I have a feeling a number would pop up into your mind, and trust the number that comes through. Um, and like I said, I don't have all of the knowledge. It's a long time since I read that book by Ainsley MacLeod, about what each soul number represents and what that means for you in terms of lessons or experiences needed to have. So highly recommend going to read that book. But needless to say, I don't know that it's necessarily so important as much as it is to know if I am an older soul, what does that mean for me? So am I level 6 and up? And that's what we're going to talk about now. This is sort of the trajectory for a soul who's level 6 and up, or the character traits of one who is six and up. And so the first thing I will say is, if we're going to kind of umbrella or blanket term an old soul, again, it's that you are closer to the awareness that you are a spiritual being having a human experience. And the closer you get to that awareness, the higher your soul level is going to be. And there's a difference between sort of knowing that concept, right? Understanding it and actually embodying it or living with that knowledge and, living your life according to that understanding, right? It's one thing to grasp a concept and another one to embody it, right? So I don't mean, just by hearing that I'm a soul having a human experience means I'm a level 10 isn't really the case. It's more that, you've embodied it and you live your life that way, knowing that there's more to this than, the 3D world that we find ourselves in. And so that being said, sort of the first trait of an old soul is that chances are you're more likely someone who's into spirituality. You've undergone a spiritual awakening. Maybe you're more open minded or aware of the fact that there's more to life than survival. There's more to life than just, you know, getting enough money and food on the table and having shelter. If we think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, we kind of think beyond our needs being met because we have this deeper understanding that we are a piece of the master and that the universe or God or source or whatever is always going to provide those things for us. And therefore, if I know that and I deeply know that within my body, then survival is not my focus. My focus is self-actualization, and mastery are the key themes in my life. Mastery over the universe in some way. And so if you are someone who's into spirituality, maybe you're into the laws of the universe, you're into, law of attraction and manifestation and spirituality, and sort of recognizing that everything is energy and I can achieve mastery over that energy because I am such a powerful being myself as being part of the master, then guaranteed you're an old soul, right? If these are the things you're exploring, these are the themes that are coming through for you in this lifetime, 100%, this is an old soul, because I would argue that a younger soul is much more focused on just getting through the day, just surviving, getting their needs met. Um, Another thing I want to share that would kind of identify you as an old soul is recognizing that an old soul will definitely have had a lot of lifetimes here on the planet. And all of those lifetimes, in each lifetime, we sort of acquire and attain or retain rather new skills, right? If in one life you were a baker and in another life, you were a singer and in another life you were a woodworker, right? You have acquired all of these really beautiful skills. Maybe you were a musician in one life. Somebody who's an old soul is going to present themselves or discover that they are quite multi-talented, multi-purpose, and multifaceted because there are so many remembered skills from previous lives. And so they tend to be an individual that, even again, remembering that we do choose amnesia in each life. So sometimes we have to relearn these skills, but it feels like things come to us more easily. You pick them up quickly, you gain mastery over them quickly. But what's interesting about this scenario in an old soul is that you may also be an individual who picks things up quickly and just, gets good at it really quickly and just as easily gets bored of it and kind of drops it and moves on to the next thing that next skill that you were ready to pick up and kind of gain mastery over. So it almost feels like you jump around a lot. You kind of pick up a new skill or get interested in a new skill really quickly. You get good at it really quickly, and then you get bored just as quickly and kind of move on to the next. And the reason being is one, that your soul kind of has the sense of been there, done that, right? Your soul kind of feels like, I spent a whole lifetime mastering that skill. I don't need to do that again, but my soul remembers how to do it. So I picked it up easily. And so if you kind of feel like you're a jack of all trades in this lifetime and you jump from one interest to the next, then you're probably an old soul because your soul remembers those skills. And more importantly, your body remembers those skills. We see this a lot in children as well. I mean, there's so many crazy videos going out there, especially when we see things like child prodigies, right? kids who have maybe never seen a piano and just sit down in front of it and play like a beautiful, symphony for the first time. And, that can't be a skill that was taught to them. It's a remembered skill. Their soul remembers. And again, maybe they're passionate for it, but they've already had a lifetime where they spent their whole life achieving mastery over it. So they're very good at it, but maybe they're not so interested in continuing to pursue it. Sometimes they are. But it is a remembered skill. And so it's much more clear sometimes to see it in child prodigies than it is in yourself. But if you do tend to jump into new things quickly, and you kind of pick them up easily and then kind of lose interest and move on, you're probably an old soul, right? You've had many, many lifetimes and you've learned many, many different skills over the course of that time. And I do want to argue here that, you know, if this is the case, just because you're good at a certain skill doesn't mean that you have to pursue it as your path or your purpose. Again, there's a chance that if it doesn't interest you and you kind of go, but I'm really good at singing, maybe I should be pursuing it because it's this God-gifted talent that I have, this natural talent that I have over other people. But, if you're not feeling drawn to it, you just feel good at it, chances are it's because you've had a whole lifetime pursuing that as your purpose and you don't feel called to do so again. In which case, you can chalk it up to my soul remembers. It's great that I'm good at this. It's just an indication I've been here for a long time. And go forth and sort of search for or continue to pursue your path and your purpose for this life, which could be very different than the skills that you've already acquired in previous lives. Um, so another sort of trait that you have if you're an old soul is many souls sort of have this feeling of urgency to find their path and their purpose and leave behind some sort of legacy. Now, this is definitely the case for an older soul. So I would say, getting closer to the end of your level, sort of, number 9 or 10 kind of level soul where you kind of have this deep knowing that you're on your way out, right? You're going to sort of be done incarnating here on the planet and may choose to switch realms after this life or after the next couple of lives. And you feel kind of this strong sense of urgency to offer this help to the other souls who still remain here on the planet. That I've sort of figured out the way the world works, I've achieved mastery in some way. And feel very strongly the urge to share these teachings with other souls who remain here so that they too can elevate and up level themselves before I leave. And so if you're feeling this sort of like urgency, like it needs to happen now, it needs to happen fast, it needs to happen in this lifetime, and you don't feel like it feels like the clock is ticking and you don't really know why, it's probably because your soul's kind of nearing the end of its incarnations and you really feel this strong need to sort of do the things you came here to do because you're on your way out. And more importantly, it's such a beautiful calling that you also feel the need to sort of share this with others and make sure that they too can elevate and join you after you ascend. So it's a really beautiful trait to have, but definitely the urgency piece is a good indication that you too are an old soul. There is this sort of rare case of old souls that I kind of see sometimes in my practice with clients. I call them sort of these souls who kind of seem to be in their retirement phase. I'm sorry if I sound like I don't know, swallowing a lot. It's this pregnancy heartburn. It's coming through a lot at this moment. But anyways, my apologies. If and so if we're talking about sort of this idea of a retirement phase, it's sort of like this soul who I would argue is kind of maybe on their last life. Maybe they've already kind of put out that piece of legacy. Maybe their last life is when they kind of took over the big stages and wrote the books and did the things, touched as many people as they could, and they kind of went, I just want one more life where I just come in and enjoy, right? I'm in my retirement phase. I'm going to travel. I'm going to let other people kind of go after their purpose. I'm just going to enjoy the present moment and kind of savor every last little piece that being in this world and playing on this planet has to offer me. They don't feel that urgency anymore because they've sort of completed their big purpose in their previous life. And this is the life where their mission is simply there to just enjoy before they kind of go on their way out. So I have seen this a couple of times, and this is only usually the case for like a level 10 soul who achieved all of that, has achieved mastery, a complete sense of peace, and is really just focused on savoring the present moment. And they then, still, even though they don't feel so propelled to kind of push this out to other people, they do act as a beautiful example to other souls who see them and kind of, are inspired by them to also sort of live in the present moment and be very grateful for where they're at. And so they do kind of fulfill that purpose in their presence and in their being. And this is really the case for, as I said, a very old soul. And I've seen it a few times. Through some of my clients, but definitely an interesting one. Um, the other thing I would share about it is you're an old soul also if you have a different perspective on life. Perhaps you have a broader perspective. Perhaps you kind of have a tendency to see the bigger picture. Maybe you don't dwell or sweat the small things as much. Maybe you kind of have this deeper understanding that you're being supported by the universe, supported by source, that, God or the universe is your bank account or is going to provide for you. And so all of the small kind of anxieties that the rest of us maybe get caught up in don't seem to phase you as much because you are aware of the bigger secrets of life. You are aware of, the laws of the universe. You know that these things can all work for you instead of to you, or, life is working for you instead of happening to you. And you tend to be really interested in harnessing this power. So you're maybe interested in harnessing the power of manifestation. Maybe you've already achieved this. Maybe you're interested in harnessing the power of energy healing, right? You know that everything is energy. You know that nothing is that serious, that everything can be shifted and manipulated to your will. And so the closer you kind of grasp these concepts and master these concepts, the closer you are to mastery, and definitely a big sign that you are on your way out, that your soul is an old one because you're achieving mastery. You understand that I am one with the universe or God, and God is me, and I'm an infinite being, and nothing else really matters, right? And so, if this is really what you're starting to step into, definitely an old soul. Now, there's more that we can sort of talk about this, but that really is the overarching message here, is the closer you are to that mastery, the closer you are to that understanding, the older soul you are. And there is something to be said about ascended masters here. So when we talk about an ascended master, we're talking about someone who's achieved this actualization here on the planet and almost seems to be sort of like a superhuman. And, people would argue that, figures such as Jesus or Buddha or the Dalai Lama, right? These people are considered sort of ascended masters. And there's more to be said about what sort of happens to their souls after ascending, but this is really what we're all kind of heading towards. We're all trying to achieve mastery, or mastery over the universe, so to speak, or ourselves in some way, and coming into this full awareness that we can be, God incarnated, so to speak, here on the planet. And this is really where we're headed. So, if this is sort of if this is sort of where you're stepping into, and even if you don't achieve that level of mastery, because I would argue that most of us are not destined to do so, as long as we kind of start to step into this understanding that this is where we're headed, this does sort of up level us multiple levels within a lifetime. And so, even if it doesn't feel like that was innately what your purpose was in this life, if you do start to gain this awareness, you do start to pursue these types of exercises, right? Mastering and harnessing the power of of energy and the universe, so to speak, then you are definitely well on your way towards the end of your reincarnations here, and you get to choose how many more lifetimes you have here on the planet. You can achieve mastery within a single lifetime if you choose to. It does definitely require a little bit of commitment, but definitely a noble pursuit, considering that at the end of the day, that's the point. That's the point of being here, Um, Another book I would love to point everybody to is Conversations with God by, I believe the author is Neil Donald Walsh. Definitely a must read for most people. And that book was so life-changing for me in terms of sort of allowing me to gain the perspective of what does it really mean to exist here on the planet, to be a soul incarnated on the planet, and what does that mean about our connection to source and who where we sort of stand in the universe. And so definitely go and check out that book. It is a trilogy, but even if you just read the first book of Conversations with God, I promise you, it is a life-changing experience. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about past lives. And so as we said, if you were an old soul, you've definitely had many past lives here on the planet. You have had, you could have had hundreds, if not thousands, of previous lives before kind of being here in the 21st century in this lifetime in 2024. And memories of these previous lives can come through in your present lifetime and act as an indication that you might be an old soul because you have unexplained memories. And so, what can this look like? This can look like flashbacks or deja vu. Right. So I feel like I've been here before, had this conversation before. Sometimes this can look like a certain feeling that you get when you go to a place that you'd never been to before. So let's say you travel to a new country, but you don't know why, but you just sort of feel at home there. And even though you've never actually been there in this lifetime before, it feels so comfortable. It feels so much like home. You feel drawn to this place. Well, chances are your soul has had a lifetime there. And so it's a good indication that, I don't know if it would indicate that you're an old soul, but it would definitely indicate that you've had previous lives, which is kind of interesting. I know this was definitely the case for me the first time I went to London, England. So, this was prior to me going on my spiritual journey or spiritual awakening. I was still in university and decided to take a summer class for my undergrad. So it meant spending 6 weeks at the University of London to complete a credit for English literature. And so I went and stayed in the University of London, and there was something about being in London that felt so much like home to me. I remember going and walking around the streets with my friends and not needing a map and just knowing where to go and feeling so comfortable, which is so unusual for me. I get lost in my own city. I get super lost just going downtown Toronto. But to be in London, a foreign country, a foreign city that I'd never been to before, and feeling so at home there, so alive, so invigorated there. I couldn't explain it, but something about it, I said, I feel like this is home for me. I feel like this is where I should be living. I was so drawn to it. I wanted to come back. And it's so interesting because as I did, several years later, when I did go through my spiritual awakening and did first experience a past life regression or a past life, I discovered that I did, in fact, have many lifetimes in London. And so it does make sense that it felt like so much at home to me that I felt like I knew it like the back of my hand because I had so many lives there. And so even though I'd never been there before in this lifetime, it explained the feeling of home that I sort of felt. There was sort of like a soul imprint or a soul memory. And so, it is sort of an indication possibly that you are an old soul just because you kind of have some of these memories. And so I do want to talk about, what is the point of having all of these past lives if we can't sort of utilize them to our advantage, right? So there is something to be said about learning or uh, remembering some instances from past lives in order to help us achieve some sort of mastery in this life. If we are an old soul, some of those acquired experiences are going to lend themselves to being helpful to us achieving mastery in this life because we can remember maybe old mistakes that we don't want to repeat, lessons that have already been learned, all of those things. And so I would argue that in most cases, it is important to go ahead and try and pursue remembering some of our past lives. I do want to say that, chances are you, especially if you're an old soul, you've had hundreds, if not thousands, of previous lives. And so, no, I don't think it's necessary to go in and remember all of those lives. Some of them are, others are much more significant than, some are more significant than others. And so when we are kind of going into and trying to connect with previous lives, it's important to try and search for the ones that have left a lasting impression on your current life, have perhaps left behind some unfinished business that you're needing to then achieve in this lifetime. This can ultimately lead you to finding your path and purpose in this life. What is the unfinished business, the thing that I didn't quite learn or experience in my previous life that's going to play out as a mission for me this time around that I promised myself I wasn't going to do again, or that I promised myself I was going to complete because I didn't get enough time in that lifetime to complete it, or perhaps the circumstances that I was living in didn't allow me to kind of fully actualize this goal I had for myself. And so it is important. And so how do we do this? Well, one of the ways that we can start to remember or you know, relive or experience a past life is through something called a past life regression. And honestly, I've never been to a past life regressionist before, but I have had past life regressions because what a past life regression really is going into a deep state of hypnosis and or meditation and or visualization in order to see or access a part of your subconscious that you wouldn't access normally in your waking life. And so you can obviously see a past life regression therapist who will hypnotize you, so to speak, and allow you to visualize and see or imagine a previous life that you have had because you're tapping into yourself in a subconscious state. But you can also do this through a deep meditation. And this is something that I have done for myself and on myself. And I have also done it with clients in allowing them to see their own past lives. And I don't claim to have any type of hypnotherapy qualifications, but through a deep level of meditation, we have been able to access their previous lives through tapping into their subconscious mind. And so that's really all it takes is to get into a deep enough state of rest, relaxation, and meditation in order to achieve um, a subconscious connection, right? Or connection to your subconscious mind. And so you can find meditations like these on apps like Insight Timer. You could put yourself into a deep meditation or a meditative state. You can ask a medium. I know I do this with clients. Sometimes we do kind of, I wouldn't say it's official past life regressions. Like I said, I've never been officially trained, but I have walked clients through a quote unquote past life regression just by getting them again into a deep meditative state and then starting to ask their subconscious mind certain questions. So, if you go through a deep meditation and set the intention of connecting with your most significant previous life, and then start to ask your subconscious to show you a past life, possibly start to show you or start to ask very specific questions, you will start to allow it to come through. So, step one really go into a deep meditation, right? Really center and ground yourself, really use your breath, really go into a deep level of meditation. A meditation that maybe involves a lot of visualization often works in this sense or in this setting. So, visualizing a beautiful place in nature that's going to ground you, that's going to center you, and then sort of ask your subconscious to show you your most significant past life. And then, after you do this, you do want to allow your imagination to sort of run wild. Let the movie play in your head. And like I said, in the context of channeling, I wouldn't even argue that this is channeling. This is just accessing a different part of your own brain. You do have to kind of allow yourself to imagine. Okay. And trust that whatever you're imagining in that moment is a connection to your subconscious mind. And so, when you get there and you let the movie play in your head, you can start to ask yourself questions, even ask them out loud and let the movie play in your head, or start to speak out loud and let it come out. And you can ask questions such as, when was this life? Where was this life? Who was I with? Are there any other souls that I know from this life who were with me in that life? And who have I had previous relationships with? What was my relationship to them then, right? If somebody was my sister in that life, are they my daughter now? Right? All of those types of questions. But most importantly, you do want to ask your subconscious mind, what are the most significant events that happened in that life that are playing out as unfinished business in my present life? What are the lessons I didn't learn or the experiences I left unfinished or need to have? And allow yourself to dream it. Allow yourself to let the answers come forward into your mind. And, know that your subconscious mind, right, your higher self, your soul always speaks the truth and will always tell you sort of what is missing, right? So, especially when we're kind of going into a past life, there's so many details. If we're talking about looking at an entire lifetime, we're talking, anywhere between 80 to 100 years, depending on how long you lived in that life. Every single detail of that life is not going to be necessary or helpful to you. So keep bringing your subconscious mind back to, or continue to ask the questions, what are the most significant events, or what events sort of acted as a means of unfinished business for me, so that I can sort of begin to find myself achieving or heading towards my path and purpose and mission in this life because of what was missed out on in the previous life. Another thing that you might want to do when you're going into a past life, again, through a deep state of meditation or hypnosis, is you can use your body to kind of tell you. And so, one thing that a lot of us have, especially with old souls, and this is actually another trait of an old soul, is that we sort of have these unexplained or repeating ailments, or unexplained fears or emotions that, we kind of don't really know where they're coming from. I know I've had a client who said, I don't know where it came from. When I hit this age, I suddenly had a fear of driving in my car, right? Or somebody else, right? And Ainsley McLeod talks a lot about these different types of ailments in his book, The Instruction, where if you have like a recurring back pain or neck pain, there's a chance maybe you were beheaded in a previous life. So sometimes these unexplained ailments have to do with the way in which you died in a previous life. And so the fear comes through. And just by reliving the past life and seeing what happened, that in and of itself gives you the awareness and heals it. So just by going back into that life and re-witnessing the quote unquote traumatic experience can in effect like effectually heal it, or you can send love back to that version of yourself in order to heal it. And so if you do have a lot of these sort of unexplained fears or irrational fears, they could be just picked up traumas from previous life, and so it can be very helpful for you to go and do a meditation and connect with what happened in a previous life. And one thing that you can do in order to figure that out is if you do have a particular ailment or like physical ailment in your body, right? Your neck is always hurting, or you have this unexplained thing in your stomach, or whatever it is, it could be from a previous life. And so, what you can do is actually connect to that part of your body and ask your body to explain it to you or show you what happened in a previous life that's causing this ailment. And so, I want to kind of give an example of this because it sounds kind of crazy. But I did have an experience like this. And this, again, was just at the beginning of me starting to kind of go through my intuitive development journey and my spiritual awakening. And so I was in my kind of early to mid 20s at this point. And all of a sudden, I was newly married. So, not looking to have children anytime soon. But I was having these really weird, and sorry if this is TMI for the gentleman out there, but I was having these really weird symptoms coming around my period. And so I was, it came on very suddenly, and it was like every month I'm having suddenly these very painful periods, followed by these bouts of almost depression or sadness the week following. And I went and got everything checked out, and physically, I was fine. My hormones were fine, my health was fine, everything was good, and so it didn't check out why I was having these sensations, and it felt like the more I dove into the physical side of things, it was very unexplained. There was no reason as to why I was kind of experiencing this intense physical pain during my period, and then followed by a week of sort of sadness or depression. And so my mentor at the time, she told me to then tune into my womb space and see what it had to share with me, because she thought that perhaps my womb would remember. My womb would tell me what was wrong. And I remember thinking, that is the craziest suggestion I ever received. Like, thank you, crazy lady. But you know what? I was so desperate at this point for the symptoms to stop and to not have this full week where I was just down in the dumps post period that I decided to try it. And so I went out into nature and I took a few deep breaths. I kind of put myself through a little visualization meditation and started speaking to my womb space. And I asked it directly, to show me what happened, right? What's going on here? And it was like this memory flashed in my mind. And it showed me that when I had hit the same age that I was at that point, I can't remember exactly how old I was. I want to say maybe 25 at the time. And when I was 25 in a previous life, I had lost a baby from to a stillbirth. And so I had had a full pregnancy and then lost the baby or at some point right near the end and still given birth. So I had a stillbirth, followed shortly after that by a miscarriage. And so, like another pregnancy and a miscarriage, all at the age of 25 in a previous life that I had had. And, I could see the whole vision. I could see what had happened in that life. I could see what led to the miscarriage. It was actually due to malnourishment, being quite poor in that life. Also, I should mention that life was in London, by the way. Um, and, feeling a lot of sadness for the loss of these two babies, right? And so the pain I was feeling was sort of like my womb aching in some ways, or the pain that you might experience in a miscarriage, although not that I've ever had one, thank goodness, in this life, but definitely a lot of pain surrounding that, followed by a week of sort of sadness or depression for the babies I had lost. And so I remember crying and seeing this, sitting there in the woods, seeing this whole thing happen as if it had happened in front of my eyes. And I sent some love and healing back to that version of myself, that 25-year-old version of myself from a previous lifetime. And then all of a sudden, I had a good cry and I sent love to her. And then suddenly these two spirit babies came through and they looked like these two little angels or these two little spirits that came and they spoke to me. One of them actually being my son, who I currently have now, and the other baby, spirit baby, being the soul who I'm currently pregnant with. And they let me know that those two souls were coming back to me in this life. So they actually connected to me years before I actually conceived them in this life. And they told me, we were those two babies. We are coming back to you in this life, but not for a few more years. And this is exactly what happened. And I remember these souls because, when I did conceive these two babies, I remembered what those spirits looked like. And when they came to me and said, now I'm coming, I remembered that from that experience that I had had. But what's most significant about this, besides getting to sort of connect with my spirit babies years before they actually came through, which was so beautiful, is that after connecting to this past life of mine and sending love to that younger version of myself, the painful periods followed by the bouts of sadness completely disappeared. I never had it again. And so, this is so powerful. And we can talk a little bit about how this works or how this is even possible that we can do this and why specifically did it only start when I was 25. And, there's sort of this idea of quantum physics, which again, I don't claim to be a scientist, but there is this understanding that, all of our lives are not happening in chronological order, but rather all at the same time, one life stacked on top of each other, which is why we're able to access them because they're all happening at once. So when I hit the same age that I was in that life, when the pain happened and the miscarriage happened, I started to feel that same pain because a version of myself was going through it at that moment. And so by sending love or healing back to that version of myself, I healed it in that life for her and in this life for me, which is really, really beautiful. Other things I've experienced in past life meditations, I was able to see sort of, visualizations of experiences or lifetimes that I'd had with my own mom. And she and I have had many lifetimes together and sort of the roles that we play with each other in previous lives and then choose to kind of have those role reversals in this lifetime, which has given me a lot of understanding towards, our relationship in many aspects in this life. And so, it can be so helpful. So I definitely encourage you to give it a try. Chances are, like I said, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably an old soul, but go ahead and explore your previous lives. You can get a lot of unexplained things in your life answered, and it's so powerful. And hopefully, and I really encourage you to do this, maybe it will point you a little bit closer to your overall path and purpose in this life. And so that's everything I really have to share about kind of if you're an old soul and how to connect to your past lives for today. And if you did like this episode and it really resonated with you, don't forget to share it with a friend and give this podcast a 5-star review so that even more people can find this information and start to heal their lives as well. It has been so beautiful, and I will catch you guys in the next episode. Bye.